Hey everybody, it's Thursday, September 14th, 2023. Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Show. It's me, your man, MG Marcus Grant, with my guy, Michael F. Florio. We're previewing the late Sunday games and the Monday night doubleheader, plus we're giving you our Week 2 fantasy heroes. We will go down to the AFC South. A couple of rookie quarterbacks in the Colts and the Texans. Anthony Richardson going against C.J. Stroud. But let's talk about a wide receiver because Michael Pittman had a pretty good day, 97 yards and a touchdown, although one of them was a long catch and run. Are you starting Michael Pittman in this one against Houston?
I don't think I am. I understand the volume and everything that he saw in week 1, but the Texans have allowed the fewest passing touchdowns since the start of last season, and they're in the bottom 10 in passing yards allowed. It gets overlooked because they have the worst run defense in football. And I expect a Colts team with Anthony Richardson. They're getting Zach Moss back. I think they're going to try to establish the run all day long, and I don't think this is a game where they'll be trailing. That is why they had to throw so much in the second half last week against the Jaguars.
Yeah, the fact that this is, I anticipate being a close game is what means Michael Pittman may not see quite as much volume. Plus, and I said on the show on Monday that it was nice that he had that big game, but so much of it was yards after the catch, and that is a really hard way to live for fantasy managers. So I would stay away from Michael Pittman if I could in this one. And as much as the Texans have been bad against the run, I think DeMeco Ryans is really going to turn it up on this defense this year. But since I anticipate this being close, I think this is going to be a run-heavy game for both sides there. Chiefs and the Jaguars, a replay of a playoff game from last year, very good playoff game from last year. The Chiefs somehow just survived. They did not survive in week 1 against the Lions. No Travis Kelce that week. Hopefully he's available this week. We know we're starting Patrick Mahomes. We're starting Travis Kelce if he plays. Are you starting any other Chiefs?
Sounds pretty crazy to say, but I don't think so. Isaiah Pacheco last week had single-digit carries. He was playing with 3 running backs total in that backfield. It was just a committee there, and he was getting pulled near the goal line still. Kadarius Toney is coming off his worst game as a pro. Sky Moore was lost out there, not getting any targets. You could call me crazy, though. If you need to start a second Chief, I actually think it's Kadarius Toney. I still expect better days ahead, but I feel much more confident leaving him on the bench and seeing it first rather than plugging him in the starting lineup.
That's where I am with the Chiefs. I would rather see it at this point before I make the move. I'm not giving up on Sky Moore yet. I'm not dropping him, but I'm also not starting him this week against Jacksonville. I guess the upside is the Chiefs are going to have to score. Jacksonville can move the ball. Jacksonville can score. Kansas City's going to have to score to keep up with them, which means they're going to have to spread the football around to guys other than Travis Kelce. But until I kind of figure out how this thing is arranged, I'm kind of staying away from Kansas City pass catchers at this point. Chicago Bears down to Tampa Bay against the Buccaneers. The Bears' offense was not very good last week against the Green Bay Packers. DJ Moore was a guy that people had expectations for, and that didn't work out in week 1. Does DJ Moore bounce back this week?
He'll have a better game than week 1. I feel very confident in saying that, but I'm not so sure he's going to have a big blow-up game. The Bucs are just kind of middle of the pack when it comes to defense against the pass. Justin Fields, for as much as I like him, he did not look good in week 1, and there's a lot that they need to get right. So I think DJ Moore will be better than he was last week, but I'm expecting this to be more of like a median game. I don't think he has a big blow-up game or anything like that.
I keep saying that I just wasn't vocal about it, but I was worried about DJ Moore because we were still so unsure about Justin Fields as a passer. And yes, it's only 1 game into the season, but as you mentioned, it didn't look good. We know he can run with the football. How is he distributing the football through the air still remains to be seen. And I think this is going to be a low volume passing offense. It's not going to be, you're not going to see Justin Fields go out there and have a lot of, games with 275, 300 yards. You're just not. And because of that, guys like DJ Moore will struggle a little bit. I do think that if there's a pass catcher that maybe you can take a shot at, it's Cole Kmet. And it comes back to the, tight ends have a lower bar for success than every other position. So I'm still very hands-off with the Bears passing game at this point. Chargers and the Titans. Chargers trying to bounce back after another disappointing, frustrating loss. The Titans offense looked awful against the Saints, especially in the passing game. Is this a get-right week for DeAndre Hopkins and the rest of the Tennessee Titans?
I think it's a get-right game for DeAndre Hopkins, but not the rest of the Titans. Ryan Tannehill looked rough the other day. You want to hear his stat line? 16 of 34 for 198 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 28.8 passer rating. I mean, that is atrocious. But DeAndre Hopkins, 13 targets, 7 catches, 65 yards. That sort of volume going up against a team like the Chargers, who allowed a whole bunch of production last week. And I think the Titans will have to throw to keep up with the Chargers. I'm fine starting DeAndre Hopkins. It's the rest of the pass catchers I'm petrified on. Like Burks and Chigakonko, the other 2 pieces we were excited for here, combined for 5 targets.
Yeah, Tannehill missed them on a couple of shots too, which is a little bit disconcerting. I think Nuke's going to be fine. I do sort of like Burks as a deep sleeper, though, just because, as you mentioned, the Titans will have to throw the ball to stay in the game, and I think they can take some shots down the field. We saw the Dolphins go over the top. Now, mind you, that was with Tyreek Hill, who is maybe the fastest man in the NFL right now, but I do think they can take some shots downfield with Treylon Burks, so maybe he's got some deep sleeper appeal. I think mostly this is going to be a big Derrick Henry game because you've got a run defense that has not been very good lately. And the Titans don't want to throw the ball a lot. They may have to, depending on how the game script goes, but they don't want to have to throw the football a lot. So that means they may lean on El Tractorcito in another part of the game to try and keep this thing close for as long as possible. We are not done with our game previews. We will keep it rolling along the Sunday slate, including... Is there a new wide receiver one in Los Angeles? We'll talk about that as we preview the 49ers and Rams and more coming up after the break on the NFL Fantasy Football Show. Giants and the Cardinals, which was a very interesting NLCS back in 1987. I don't know how exciting it's going to be as an NFL game in 2023. Giants coming back off of a really bad loss to the Cowboys. The Cardinals lost a narrow game to the Commanders, the first of what we anticipate will be many losses this year for Arizona. Marquise Brown is the number 1 wide receiver for the Cardinals. Will you ever feel confident starting him regardless of who the quarterback is?
I don't think so, no. And I'm very happy that I fade. It took 1 week for me to be like, yeah, fading him was the right choice. Because even last week, he had more rushing yards than receiving yards. He caught 3 passes. I just don't trust Josh Dobbs to consistently take advantage of his downfield abilities. So I'm going to get away from Marquise Brown every week if possible.
It speaks volumes that it looked for a long time as though the Cardinals might be starting Clayton Tune, or maybe they would have Colt McCoy. And then just before the season started, they released Colt McCoy. They signed Josh Dobbs, and then they put him ahead of Clayton Tune in the quarterback depth chart. That says a lot about where they are with that position right now, and that is going to naturally have an impact on Marquise Brown. It is going to be a struggle. James Conner is the only Cardinal that I really trust on a regular basis. I think I might have Zach Ertz in a couple of leagues. Not excited about that, but Marquise Brown is completely off my list all season. Maybe if when Kyler comes back, we can revisit this conversation. Yeah. But for now, I am out on Hollywood. 49ers and the Rams, big rivalry game in week 2 at SoFi Stadium. Puka Nacua burst on the scene in a big way in week 1, and now he is the darling of fantasy football. That was against the Seahawks. Do you start him against the 49ers this week?
Look, it depends on your options, but I'm starting him in a couple of leagues myself this week. Puka went out, and I think he's very for real. He looked like Cooper Kupp for the Rams. He 44% target rate. That was tied for the league lead with Tyreek Hill. He was the first read on a lot of plays, and I know the Niners look like a tough matchup, but they struggle against slot receivers. They've allowed the second most yards to slot receivers since last season. Puka and Tutu Atwell, who I think is also a deep sleeper, split slot reps.
It is about volume for me, and that's why Puka is startable. And again, I'm with you, depending on who your options are. I wouldn't start him as more than a flex this week, but the potential volume against San Francisco makes him worth having in your lineup. But if you were able to get him off the waiver wire, or if you were ahead of the curve and you drafted him, hold on to him, because I think you're going to see him have a role all year long in this Rams offense. I think he's going to be the guy that, when Kupp comes back, he's obviously going to step back a little bit, but he is going to continue to have a role in this offense. And I think if you are really needing somebody as a flex spot there, or if you're in a 3 wide receiver league, I think Puka Nacua is in play. Jets and the Cowboys could be a defensive struggle here, because the Cowboys defense obviously very good. The Jets defense looks very good against the Bills in week 1. The Cowboys, look, Dak was not particularly great. Their wide receivers were just kind of okay. They didn't really need anybody because the defense did so much work. Which Cowboys would you start against the Jets this week?
Tony Pollard is a must start each and every week. As even last week when no one on the offense did anything, he had a huge game. I think I'm still going to start CeeDee Lamb just because he's CeeDee Lamb. He was a first-round pick. We saw Stephon Diggs have a big game even against this Jets tough secondary. So I think CeeDee Lamb remains in play. Outside of those two, and obviously the Cowboys defense against Zach Wilson, I'm saying sit the rest of your Cowboys.
Absolutely starting the Cowboys defense. That's a no-brainer this week against Zach Wilson. It's kind of the big stars. It's Pollard, it's CeeDee Lamb. I might give Brandon Cooks a look. But again, that's as a third wide receiver this week. I'm not expecting big things out of Brandon Cooks. I just think this will be a low-scoring game. I'm not expecting big points from either side here. So outside of the two defenses, I'd probably start the Jets defense too.
Yeah.
Going against Dak Prescott. That's all I'm expecting, and not a lot from the skill position players.
Would you start Garrett Wilson?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'd start Garrett. I'll start Garrett Wilson pretty much anywhere. The expectations are downgraded, but I'm still starting him because he is the best wide receiver on that team for sure, without a doubt. Because, we saw last week, even after Zach Wilson came in, they were still throwing. This catch is going to live forever. It was amazing. I saw it in real time. It just was like, what are you doing? It was amazing.
I love that Trey White rolls over and it's like, you caught that? Like, he was mind blown.
I was mind blown. I wasn't even there. I was 3,000 miles away. Commanders and the Broncos. What are you doing with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson against a pretty good Denver secondary?
I want to say get away from them if you can, because this matchup really, really scares me. Like last week, the Broncos were able to kind of hold Devontae Adams in check. 6 for 66 isn't a terrible game, but for Devontae Adams, that's not a great game. It was Jacoby Myers having the bigger game of the two. So It depends on options, though, and on a lot of the teams where I have Terry McLaurin, I don't feel good enough about my other bench options to sit him. But, if you picked up Puka Nacua, I think that is a legit decision that you have to make between the Commanders receivers and Puka.
I start McLaurin. I probably stay away from Dotson. And I don't really feel excited about Terry McLaurin this week. And I feel like that was a conversation about the Commanders receivers all offseason. We saw McLaurin's ADP below what it had been in previous years. Maybe some of that had to do with Sam Howell. Not really sure. But I'm not really excited about starting McLaurin in this situation. Like I said, I'm staying away from Dotson altogether. But I would get McLaurin just because he is the more dynamic of the two. He can do a little more. The ceiling is a little bit higher, which means the floor hopefully is a little bit safer as well. But it is not a really great situation in week 2 for McLaurin and Jahan Dotson there. We got a couple primetime games left. In fact, we've got a Sunday night game and 2 Monday Night Football games to preview. We'll get to that and our fantasy heroes next on the NFL Fantasy Football Show. Sunday Night Football, the Miami Dolphins head to New England to take on the Patriots. The Pats had a pretty good fantasy day. Mac Jones was, I think, the QB2 at the end of the week, which is a little bit shocking. Kendrick Bourne had a couple of touchdowns. But in general, we're starting Ramondre. We're not starting a whole lot of other guys. Are you starting any Patriots not named Ramondre Stevenson this week?
I think that Mac Jones is in play as a streaming option if you lost Aaron Rodgers or if you're in a 2-quarterback league, anything like that. In one 2-quarterback league I'm in, the Rodgers manager dropped 71 out of 100 fab dollars on Mac Jones. I think Kendrick Bourne is in play as a deeper sleeper. Hunter Henry is a tight end that I actually am recommending starting this week. I feel good about him. But for me, it's Ramondre or Henry are the two that I really want to start. The other guys are just okay, I guess if I need to go deeper, they're good options.
I play in a deep enough league where I had to start Kendrick Bourne last week, and that worked out pretty well. And I think I may end up having to start him this week because the situation hasn't changed a whole lot. The upside here is that if Miami can score, which is not a guarantee against a Bill Belichick defense, that New England will have to score to keep up. Mac Jones has been playing some really good football going back to the end of last year as well. I believe it's 4 straight games with at least 2 touchdown passes for Mac Jones. So he is definitely in play, as you mentioned, as a streaming option. Hunter Henry should probably be getting some more attention, some more love, although he is throughout his career sort of been touchdown dependent, I guess, as are a lot of tight ends, but the opportunity should be there for him in this game and in this New England offense all year long. So there are some guys out there, and we came into the season not really talking much about the Patriots. There are some guys out there that are potentially startable. One of the two Monday night games, an NFC South battle, the New Orleans Saints over to Carolina to take on the Panthers. We know we like Chris Olave. Rashid Shaheed has been a popular waiver wire target. But what about Michael Thomas? Can you start can't guard Mike going forward?
I think he's certainly in play. What impresses me is he led the Saints wide receivers with 82% of the snaps in week 1. He saw 8 targets. He caught 5 of them for 61 yards. That's a solid game. Look, he's not the Michael Thomas of old anymore,
right?
But I think he could be a really solid wide receiver 3 flex option, and he brings more upside than that if you can find the end zone or anything.
That's where I am on him. He's a flex option for me right now. That's probably about it. Now, mind you, this Carolina defense isn't awful. They will slow you down a little bit. Plus, I think the Saints are not necessarily a super high-powered offense. We saw them really kind of have their ups and downs with Tennessee last week, but I do think Thomas is going to see enough opportunity, enough targets that he is worth a flex spot most weeks, depending on what you have on your roster. Our last game, the second Monday night game, the Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers. You mentioned Deshaun Watson didn't look particularly great in week 1. Do you start him or sit him against Pittsburgh?
I am most likely sitting him this week. And when I was advocating to draft Deshaun Watson a lot this preseason, I was saying pair him with another quarterback. And in the leagues that I have him in, my other quarterback happens to be Danny Dimes. So I'm starting Danny Dimes over him. What I love is that he found the end zone with his legs. He was running. I need to see better results as a passer. Plus, the Steelers defense, they're not an elite defense, but they're not a pushover by any stretch either. So I think you probably could find a better option.
Yeah, I'm not starting Deshaun Watson this week because I, like you, in places I drafted him, drafted another quarterback because there was risk in drafting Watson after last season. This is not a matchup I really would want to mess around with. Plus, I also want to kind of get a look at what the Browns' offense is. Again, I want another look at them in a game where the weather isn't bad and they're not running away with things.
I do feel bad for him because every game since he's returned, he has played in poor weather. Like, we have yet to see a game where we're like, okay, that is Deshaun Watson in good conditions.
Yeah, it's been a while. So I'm staying away from Deshaun Watson this week. We'll see how it goes. I do think, though, by the way, Elijah Moore, though, could be a sleeper in that game. So there it is. It's time now for Fantasy Heroes, where we each pick a guy who could help lift your team to victory. So who is putting on the cape for you this week?
Big Mike Williams.
BMW.
He plays right across the street. His team wears jerseys that are similar to the color of our walls here. I just love this matchup. The Titans are the absolute best matchup a wide receiver could have. Last season, since the start of last season, they've allowed the most yards and fantasy points to the position, but they specifically have allowed by far the most yards. They've allowed over 1,200 yards on deep passes. Only one other team has even allowed over 1,000 on those. They've also allowed the most touchdowns. You know who the Chargers' best deep threat is? It's Mike Williams. I think with Kellen Moore there, we're going to get more deep shots. I think Justin Herbert, Mike Williams take advantage of this matchup. We could have a monstrous game, I'll say, for Mike Williams.
And he had a decent game last week, but he got hurt for a little bit, missed a good chunk of the game, and then came back a little bit later. I wonder if he stays in, what those numbers look like. It's time for Who's Gonna Eat, presented by Uber Eats. Managing a fantasy team and hitting refresh on your scores works up an appetite, so order with Uber Eats today. Amon-Ra St. Brown was very good in week 1. I think he'll continue to be very good again in week 2 against the Seattle Seahawks because the Seahawks give up a lot of catches over the center of the field. That is what the Lions like to do. They like to run that play action, hit ARSB on those in-breaking routes. We know he is the number 1 target for Jared Goff in a game that has sneaky shootout potential. Amon-Ra St. Brown should get plenty of opportunities, continue to be the wide receiver number 1 in our hearts, and I look for him to be another fantasy hero again this week. If you drafted him, if you went all in on ARSB, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. That was Who's Gonna Eat, presented by Uber Eats, the official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Even if you make the wrong fantasy lineup call, make the right call on delivery. Order with Uber Eats today. By the way, I looked it up. The weather in Pittsburgh on Monday night should be clear. Maybe a little bit of wind, but not terrible. So maybe we'll see Deshaun Watson in decent conditions.
So you got no excuses now anymore. Now you got to go out and play.
Now you got to go out and play. It's not going to be storming, apparently. That's according to the weather report that I just looked up. Don't blame me if it changes. That is it. We are done. We appreciate you hanging out with the NFL Fantasy Football Show. You know the drill. Tell two friends to tell two friends. Rate, review, and remember, I don't have anything clever to say. The show's over. Be safe, take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you again real soon.